We are starting to get a little more complex now, and we are going to talk about dependent, or sometimes they're called subordinate phrases and clauses. If we are diagramming, normally when you're diagramming, you have subject, verb, direct object. But sometimes you have an idea that has a subject and a verb, but it's not a complete sentence on its own. It's dependent or subordinate to another idea. And so if you're diagramming, you actually diagram that as this is a subordinate idea. And let's take a look at two different sentences. Because I left, my boss fired me. My boss fired me because I left. And let's look at something weird that happens when we diagram. So here is the diagram for that. And actually the computer kind of mashed two together. Let me try and separate those. Okay, that's better. So what you see here is that I have a main idea. And the main idea is the boss fired me. So that's your subject, verb, direct object. But if you notice, it's actually in the back of the sentence. And this is the main idea. We're going to talk about how I know that in a second. But it's the main idea, and we show that by putting it on the top and also by making sure that it is all the way up against the margin. Now, the less important idea is because I left, or I left is the actual subject and verb. But you can tell that that is not a complete sentence by itself. Because if I read this, if I walk up to someone and say, because I left, is that a complete thought on its own? No. But if I walk up to somebody and just say, I left, they're like, okay, thanks for letting me know. That is a complete sentence. So what in the world has happened? You had something that was a complete sentence, I left, and you have this special word, this subordinating word, because that takes something that used to be a complete sentence, I left, and turns it into a fragment, because I left. And so that's why this is called a subordinating conjunction or a dependent clause. Now, we're going to take a look at something kind of special. What happens if I go from the first diagram, this one right here, number 1, to number 2? Let me diagram number 2. How do I do that? Well, because. And I have now diagrammed number 2. The only difference in the diagram for number 1 and number 2 is the capital letters. And that is because the main idea, it is not about what's first or what's second to determine main idea. To determine main idea, you have to find the subordinating word. Whatever comes right after the subordinating word is going to be the dependent clause. That is oftentimes you'll see it called the DC, the dependent clause. And that is the idea that is less important. It has been made dependent or subordinate. It's been put underneath a main idea. Now, because subordinates are not a complete sentence on their own, because they dangle, danglies can be moved around. You can put an adjective in front of a noun or behind a noun. You can put an adverb in front of a noun or behind a noun. You can put a dependent clause in front of the main idea. The main idea is usually called an independent clause. You can put the dependent clause in front of the main idea. You can put the dependent clause behind the main idea. Danglies move. So the defining characteristic of these DC, comma, IC sentences or IC DC sentences, please pay attention to the grammar. If the dependent clause is up front, you need a comma to separate those two ideas. If the independent clause is up front, well, your subordinating word already separates the two, so you have no punctuation at all. But the defining characteristic of these subordinate clauses or ICDC, DCIC sentences is that this dependent clause can move from the front to the back. So that's how you know it's actually subordinate. Sometimes students get confused between subordinating clauses and conjunctive adverbs. And let's take a look at that in some actual sentences. Okay, when the magical cow, I have no idea how to say that, licked the ice that existed before the world existed, she uncovered the god Buri, the giant. So let's take a look. I have the magical cow, that's my subject, did something, lick, what did she lick? The direct object. She, that's my subject, verb, uncovered, what did she uncover? She uncovered the god Buri. Now, the question is, what punctuation do I have? And the answer comes in, well, how are you connecting these two ideas? Here's one idea. Here is another idea. How are they connected? Well, they are connected using this word when. When, question, can you flip-flop this? Remember, if you can flip-flop it, then that means you're looking at a DCIC construction. The magical cow uncovered the god Buri when she licked the ice that existed before the world. When the magical cow licked the ice, she uncovered the god Buri. Does it flip-flop? Yes. If it flip-flops, we know by definition we have the ICDC structure. So even if we don't recognize this as a subordinating conjunction, we can test for that by seeing if it flip-flops. If I have the subordinate word up front, then that means that this is the subordinate idea. This is the dependent clause. And that means to separate my DC from my IC, what do I need there? I need a comma. Okay, so you ready to take a look at another one? Okay, after. Ooh, that seems to be one of those little connecting words, so let's just mark it and then we'll take a look at it. After Buri married the goddess Besla, they had 3 children, Odin, Vili, and V. So, where are my main ideas? Well, what's the main idea that is attached to after? After what? After Buri married Besla. Do I then have subject and verb? Subject, verb, direct object. So, is this a dependent clause? Well, can I flippy-flop it? After Buri married the goddess Besla, they had 3 children. Buri and Besla had 3 children after Buri married the goddess Besla. Yes, it flip-flops, which means this is a DC. This is the IC. And you can look at this and you can see this could be a complete sentence on its own. They had 3 children. This could have been a complete sentence. Buri married the goddess Besla, except it is subordinated. And so it's become a fragment. But remember, any time that we are joining together the DC and the IC with the DC up front, I have to have a comma. Okay, Odin was the leader because he was the god of wisdom. And you can very quickly see you've got subject-verb, you've got subject-verb. How are they joined together? Well, I've got this word because. Is that a word that creates a DC, a subordinate or a dependent clause? Well, let's take a look. Odin was the leader because he was the god of wisdom. Because Odin was the god of wisdom, he was the leader. Does it flip-flop? Yes. If it flip-flops, that means this word right here has created a dangly, a dependent. This is the dependent word. Everything that comes after it is the less important dependent clause. Everything that's in front of it, then, this half is going to be the independent clause. If the structure I have is DC, IC, you have to have a comma. The structure goes DC, comma, IC. If the structure is IC, DC, what should you do with your punctuation? Nothing. So you should not have any punctuation at all in this sentence. The word because already separates out this DC here from this IC, this independent clause. Okay, let's take a look at the next one. Odin sacrificed his eye, therefore he gained the right to see all that would happen in the world. So we have Odin sacrificing. What does he sacrifice? His eye. We then have he gained. What did he gain? The right to see all. So I do have two complete sentences, and it is being connected together with a word, therefore. So is that a dependent clause? Well, let's check to see if it flippy flops. Odin sacrificed his eye, therefore he gained the right to see everything. Odin gained the right, therefore Odin gained the right to see everything. Odin sacrificed his eye. Whoa, that's weird. That's really weird. It doesn't flip-flop naturally. You can't take this idea and put it in the front and keep therefore with it. So that tells you, because it doesn't flip-flop, this is not a DC word. Nope, nope, nope. What is this? Because it doesn't flip-flop, that means it has to be a conjunction. It's too big for a coordinating conjunction. Those are our fanboy words, which means this is a conjunctive adverb word. Now, if I am joining two complete sentences with a conjunctive adverb, what do you have to have in front of it? A semicolon. What do you have to have behind it? A comma. So this actually, because it is a conjunctive adverb, let me go back to my pen. This is a conjunctive adverb, and I could tell that because it didn't flippy flop. We have to put semicolon up front, comma, behind. So you can see that the confusion comes when you have words like because and therefore that are of similar lengths. And we talked about the fact you've got to be careful to not judge things based on how long it is, because these are similar in lengths, but their function is different. This cannot flip. No flipping here. And because there's no flipping, that's what tells you you're looking at a conjunctive adverb. And so you have to go into the conjunctive adverb rules. Now, that's also significant because when you have a conjunctive adverb means these two ideas are equally important. That's very different from a DC, IC, IC, DC sentence, a subordinate sentence, because in a subordinate sentence, you have one main idea and you then have an idea that dangles because it is less important. So these are doing very different things. A conjunctive adverb emphasizes the relationship between two equally important ideas. A subordinate clause is less important. The DC is less important. And so you have one main idea and then one dangly. So let's see if you can keep identifying where the grammar goes. The three brothers attacked the largest giant, a being named Ymir. And actually that should be set off with commas because this isn't a positive. We'll get into that later. So a being named Ymir is a definition, so we set off with commas, because the giants kept breeding and destroying life. So we know that we've got the subject and the verb. We know we have the subject and the verb. These two things are joined together with the word because. If this word is a conjunctive adverb, I'm going to need a semicolon up front and a comma behind it. And the semicolon would take the place of this comma that's part of the appositive. If this word is a dependent clause word, then because the dependent clause word is in the middle and what comes after it is dependent, I would not need any additional punctuation at all. How do I tell whether I am looking at a conjunctive adverb or a dependent clause? I ask myself, can it flip? Well, can it? The three brothers attacked the largest giant because the giants kept breeding. Because the giants kept breeding, the three brothers attacked the largest giant. Does it flip? Yes. Because it flips, that means we know it is a dependent clause, so I do not have to add any additional punctuation. Now, in this case, I do still have that comma there, but that comma has nothing to do with the because. That comma is part of this set because we have this interjection. Okay. So let's keep going. The giants kept breeding and destroying life. Therefore, the three brothers attacked the largest giant, comma, a being named Ymir. Well, wow, that sounds really similar. I've got subject, verb. I've got subject, verb. Let me identify the word that's joining them. There is the word that's joining them. I ask myself the same question. Is this a dependent clause? If it is a dependent clause, because it's in the middle, I need no punctuation. Is this a conjunctive adverb? If it is a conjunctive adverb, I need a semicolon in front, I need a comma behind. How do I decide which set of rules I use? I ask myself, can it flip? So you tell me. The giants kept breeding and destroying life, therefore the three brothers attacked Ymir. Therefore the three brothers attacked Ymir, the giants kept breeding and destroying life. No, that does not sound right at all. That does not flip. If it does not flip, which side does that throw it into? It's a conjunctive adverb. So I'm going to put the semicolon in front. I'm going to put the comma behind. In terms of why we have different structures, very simple. In the sentence before, the main idea was the brothers attacked the giant Ymir. The dependent clause, this is a dangly. It's less important. It's a detail. Because it is set up in a subordinating conjunction, we're saying, dude, this is not important. Don't focus on this. Focus on the main idea. However, in the second sentence, because it uses a conjunctive adverb, that's saying these two ideas are equally important. So those are doing different jobs. It's not a matter of just randomly placing commas and semicolons. Different structures have different jobs. So let's see if we can pick up the pace a little bit. So I have one of these connecting words. After Ymir was killed, the brothers created the world out of the body, and they became the guardians of this new world because they wanted to prevent evil from returning. Holy crap, can I do that? Well, let's take a look. I've got Ymir was killed, brothers created, they became, they wanted. Woof! That can look overwhelming, but here's the deal. Just look at how any two are connected. So, Ymir was killed. There is an idea. The brothers created the world out of the body of Ymir. So, how are sentence number 1 and sentence number 2 connected? That's what after is doing. After is holding these two sentences together here. So, can that flippy flop? After Ymir was killed, the brothers created the world out of the body. The brothers created the world out of Ymir's body after Ymir was killed. Does it flip? Yes. If it flips, What are we looking at? Is this a CA or is this a DC? Because it flips, we know this is a dependent clause. Because the dependent clause is up front, what do I need in between the dependent and the independent? Okay, that means I need a comma right there. Now, we are now going to look at how is this sentence connected to the next sentence. Well, what is the next sentence? They became guardians of this new world. So, how is sentence number 3 connected to sentences 1 and 2? Well, 3 is connected to 1 and 2 right here. Do I have a complete sentence in front? Yes. Do I have a complete sentence here? Yes. If I am joining two complete sentences, what do I need to have with my coordinating conjunction? A comma. Okay, so now let's keep going. So I now have sentence number 4. Sentence number 4 says they wanted to prevent evil from returning. How is sentence number 4 connected to sentence number 3? Well, through the use of the word because. Does because allow a sentence to flip-flop? Yes. Because is a flipper word. Because this flips, that tells you it's a dependent clause. Everything that comes after it is dependent. So this is my dependent or subordinating word, a dependent word, which means all of this is dependent. If the back half is dependent, that means sentence number 3 is my independent. So I have the IC in front with the DC behind it. So number 3 is my IC. Number 4 is my DC. If the IC is in front, what do I need with my connecting word? Absolutely nothing. That is correct as it is. So let's take another look because that was big and messy. And I am hoping you are starting to see the pattern of how all these pieces fit together. So sentence 1 is connected to sentence 2 because you are looking at DC, comma, IC. Sentence 2 is connected to sentence 3 because you have independent clause and independent clause. You have two complete sentences, so that's a coordinating conjunction, comma. Sentence 3 is connected to sentence 4. This is your independent clause. This is your dependent clause with the word because. And because it is the dependent clause is in the middle here, I have no punctuation at all. So using a combination of DC, CA, and CC rules, you can thread together a lot of different sentences. Okay, let's keep going. If, that looks like a little connecting word. If Bury hadn't had 3 children, humanity would look very different because each of the 3 brothers gifted humans something different. If Bury hadn't had 3 children, Bury didn't have 3 children would be a complete sentence, but we subordinate it with the word if, making this my dependent clause. Humanity would look very different. That's my independent clause. If the DC is in front, what do I need? Comma. But then I've got because. Each of the 3 brothers gifted humans something different. So now I have a DC, an IC, and a DC. If the DC is in front, what do I need between them? A comma. If the IC is in front, what do I need between them? Nothing. So here I have a comma. Here I have nothing. So, making sense? Hope so, because you do have a quiz coming up. Okay, after, ding ding, that's a little connecting word, Odin gave 2 trees life and spirit, V and Vili. I assume you see why we use commas, because it's like, dang, where does that idea end? After Odin gave two trees life and spirit, that's where our main idea is. So there's my subject, there's my verb. Where's my next subject? Vili and V provided intelligence and feelings. And that was, because you have so many ands going here, it was really confusing about, dude, what is connected with what? That's what the comma does. The comma says, well, dude, stop right here. This is where the DC ends, and this is where the IC begins. That way you don't have to reread, and wherever the DC ends and the IC begins, you put a comma. Okay, next one. The gods put humans in Midgard because they hope to protect the young species. I've got because. Is that a word that allows flipping? Yes, that means it is a dependent clause. Whatever comes after it is less important and is subordinate or dependent. In this case, that means you have the IC up front. What kind of punctuation do you need? None. If you have ICDC, there is no punctuation. Ooh, look, quiz coming. Okay, next one. Humans didn't have any honor even though they were designed by the gods. That's two words, not one. Does that work? Well, let's see. If we are ever unsure, we just go back to our rule, and our rule is, does it flip? So let's take a look. Humans didn't have any honor even though they were designed by the gods. Even though humans were designed by the gods, they didn't have any honor. Yep, totally flips. If it flips, what is it? It is a dependent clause. Everything that comes after the subordinating word is your dependent clause. That means this front half is the independent. And if I have ICDC, what do I need in front? Nothing. Okay, the gods designed humans. However, humans only developed honor after the Heimdall. Why is there the there? After Heimdall fathered children with human mothers. So you can see we now have, again, 3 sentences. So let's stop and let's figure out what is what. We're looking for, do we have independent clauses? Do we have flipping words? So let's just go through this and see what we have. The gods designed humans. That is not subordinated. We don't have any subordinate word up front. And is that a complete sentence? The gods designed, what did they design? Humans. Yes. So sentence number 1 is an independent clause. It stands by itself. However, is however a flipper word? I like you, however you suck. However you suck, I like you. No, that does not flip. If it doesn't flip that and it is long, that means you're looking at a conjunctive adverb. Conjunctive adverb separates 2 independent clauses. So I suspect this is going to be independent. Number 2, but let's take a look. Humans developed honor. So that is independent. If I am joining 2 complete sentences, number 1 and number 2, using a conjunctive adverb, what do I have? Semicolon in front, comma behind. After is after a flipping word. I left after the machine broke. After the machine broke, I left. Yep, totally flips. If it's a flipping word, it is a DC. Everything that comes after it is a dependent clause. It is subordinate or less important. So this is less important, which means I have number 2 is an IC. Number 3 is a DC. If the IC is in front of the DC, what punctuation do you have? That would be, oh yes, none. So, you ready? You ready to give this a try? Let's see what you can do. Fair warning, you got to really stop and look for all your connecting words and figure out how to punctuate them, because we kind of have the whole kitchen sink going here. So you're going to have CCs, CAs, dependent clauses. You have to figure out what you got going. In Norse mythology, Heimdall is a god who keeps watch. because he watches for the end of the world. How would you rewrite that? Or write that? Since giants will attack the Bifrost Bridge, he listens for the invasion. How would you write that? Heimdall, however, is also known for dressing as Rig. While he wore this disguise, he slept with 3 women. Each woman gave birth to a son that became the first of his class and that was the founder for slaves, craftsmen, and nobles. Because nobles carried Heimdall's honor, the greatest of them could join the Aesir in the afterlife. When humans died in battle, Valkyries would take them to Asgard. These humans will stand with the Aesir in the last battle, therefore the gods will defeat the giants. It is important for you to have a good number of these subordinate clauses, dependent clauses. Both terms are correct. It's just different terminology. I try to use both so that if future teachers use one or the other, you recognize it's the exact same thing. It is important that you have quite a few of these dependent clauses in your writing. And that's because dependent clauses do something that none of these other structures I've shown you do. And that is they rank things in terms of importance. If something is a dependent clause, that automatically tells the readers you feel that this is less important. And because you're saying that's less important, it makes the first half more important. So anytime you have a DCIC and ICDC, you are telling the readers what's important and what isn't. So let's take a look at this one. Odin was the leader because he was the god of wisdom. That sentence tells me, dude, main idea, Odin was the leader. Odin was the leader. Odin was the leader. That's the important idea. The idea that is less important is because he was the god of wisdom. Because that's put behind this dependent clause, that is you telling me what I should be focusing on as the reader. And in written language where you don't have tone of voice, where you can't point at someone, where you can't make eye contact with them, where you can't go, Odin was the leader because he was the god of wisdom. When tone of voice is lost, it is so important that you use structure to communicate that. So using the DCs, the dependent clauses, and connecting them to independent clauses, it's important for a couple of reasons. First of all, if you do DC, IC, that means you're getting more variety in your sentence beginnings. But more than that, you are using structure to help me understand, given two ideas, which you feel is more important. You are using structure to mimic having a tone of voice that helps me understand you. So that was the workshop on dependent clauses, otherwise known as subordinating clauses. So hopefully that helped.